Now that we know a little bit about data persistence on Android, it's clear that shared preferences is a promising option for saving data. This is because shared preferences saves data between app restarts, and even when something drastic happens, like the device loses power. We can save information like, my shape should be red, in primitive key-value pairs, the key being something like shape color, and the value being a string like red. In fact, shared preferences were built with saving app preferences in mind. That's why they're called shared preferences. Because shared preferences are usually used for app settings, they work hand in hand with another part of the Android framework, which is meant for creating a user interface for settings activities. This framework class is called Preference Fragment. Before I get into how Preference Fragment works, I want to talk a little bit about what a fragment is in general. A fragment is a class that represents a modular and reusable piece of an activity. For example, sometimes in your app, you might want the ability to split up portions of the activity UI into fragments. This is so that you can reuse those portions of the UI on different screens. A common use case for this is if you want to provide a phone and a tablet layout for your app. For example, you might have an app which, on the phone, shows a list of book recommendations. When you click on a recommendation, it then shows you a detail screen about the book. In the tablet version, though, because you have quite a bit more room, you might want to actually have both of these UIs on the same screen. You can only have one activity, though. So, instead of duplicating the code, you can put the list in a fragment and the detail view in a fragment. Then, you can reuse both of these fragments. In the app for the phone, you'd show them each on a separate screen, and in the tablet version, you'd show the fragments side by side. Now, looking back at settings screens, you'll usually have an activity that can contain one or more subclasses of fragments called Preference Fragment. The Preference Fragment subclass is specifically built for displaying preferences. There's also a class called Preference Activity, which I don't want you to confuse things with. Since Honeycomb, it's been deprecated in favor of the more flexible fragment version. Since we want to stick to best practices in this course, we'll be using a preference fragment. Preference fragments populate themselves with preferences defined in XML. This is much like how our activity layouts are also created in XML. The XML is used to generate UI widgets in the fragment. When the user changes these values in the widgets, this automatically updates associated key-value pairs in the shared preferences file. Then, when you need to actually know the value of the preference, you can then read from the shared preferences file in your app. To start, we're going to create a new activity called Settings Activity. And we'll open it when you click on a menu item for the main visualizer activity. Second, we'll add a preference fragment to that settings activity. Along with the preference fragment, we'll create an XML file that defines what preferences are in the fragment. We'll pick what the preference names are, the keys that are used in the shared preferences file, and their default values. Then third, we'll tackle what happens after your user sets the preference. You'll see how to load up a preference from that file when your app first opens, and how you can be triggered whenever that preference actually changes. Finally, we'll spruce up Preference Fragment with a UI component known as the Preference Summary, which shows the current state of the preference. Okay, those are the 4 steps, so let's get started.